We've completed the first quarter of the year, and I want to ask how you're doing. How is your writing coming along? Well, what I'd like to talk to you about today is that there is no going back. And what I mean by that is there is no going back to before you were a writer. That once you're a writer, there is nothing you can do but move forward and continue to write. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about that today.
You have a story to tell, but you don't know where to start. Let me show you how to free your story. I teach you how to write and how to dig deep in your soul to release your story and make a difference in the world.
Welcome to the Julia Monte channel. I'm so happy that you're here and that you are allowing me a little bit of time to share my thoughts and some tips for writing. This is what I like to do on Fridays for you. So let's talk today about not going back and really not being able to go back. You've probably heard this story, or if not, I'll share it with you now, of Hernan Cortez when he first came to the New World and how they landed in what is today Mexico, and he had the guys burn the ships, right, that they came in. And the reason that he did that was that he knew that this was going to be really hard and this is going to be tough to settle a new world, a new land where these sailors were really far away from family and everything that they knew, and that they were going to face a lot of struggles, and they were maybe going to have fights with natives, and they were going to have to settle the land and avoid sickness, all the things that came with part of being an explorer. And so in order to make sure that they weren't tempted to return, he just decided, well, he's going to burn the ships, and that way they have no option. The only option is to stay and to fight and to work towards their goal. And in a way, it is a way to guarantee success, because you're either going to succeed or you're going to die. And so in exploration, in war, and in writing, that is a good thing to do, to keep in mind. We're going to burn everything else so that we are not going to be tempted to go back to before our decision to become a writer. So I'm going to ask you, if you were to go back, what would you go back to? When I first started writing, one of the things that I used to go to writers' workshops and conferences, and I was part of writers groups, and I would talk. I was very much younger back then, and so I would talk to some of the older writers, people that had been writing for like 20 years, and they had not been published. They had been writing. They'd been maybe somewhat successful, maybe selling novellas, or maybe not selling anything, and just getting rejection after rejection for 20 some years. And I used to think, well, wow, I don't know how they can do that. Like, how do you just continue to write after 20 years of having zero success? Like, I could understand loving writing, but I was thinking, like, are they delusional? Like, why would you continue to do something for so many years when you are not seeing any evidence of success? You're not seeing yourself move forward. And I wondered why they wouldn't move on to something else. So why not admit defeat and say, I'm going to do something else. I just wasn't successful at this. I tried, it didn't work for 20 years. I'm just going to move on and do something else. And so as a young person, this is what I thought. As today, I understand and I see that it wasn't a decision really for them to make. Like, what do you go back to? Do you ever, as a writer, are you able to go back to a time when you're not creating characters, when you're not thinking of plots in your head when something happens, when you don't watch a movie and say, oh, I could have actually written that much better, I could have done this, or they should have done that, right? I think that once you are a writer, especially for so long, it becomes almost impossible for you to go back to a time when you weren't a writer, when you weren't creating stories in your head. So I don't know exactly where that line is where we can't go back. Like, at first, maybe yes, when you're first starting, you write a story, it's like, oh, well, I'm going to become a writer. No, I'm not. Or where after you join a group, after you start submitting and getting rejections, after at what point do you reach that line where you think, I could never go back to not being a writer? I'm not quite sure where it is, and it might be in a different place for each person, but it's there. It's there where you reach a point where you're like, I could never again not write. write. And you realize that you are in this new world now, that from this day forward, you are always going to be a writer. So why does this matter? Why am I talking about this? Well, just like with the explorers, so, it might seem like, oh, well, where's the relevance here? You're talking about explorers and writing. But actually there is something relevant, right? Because what were these people doing? They were exploring a new world. They were exploring new land, new possibilities. And they were frightened. They didn't know what they were going to find. They didn't, and Cortez knew this, right? He knew that, hey, these guys, they're going to need to be forced to succeed because it is scary and it's a change. It's something they've never seen before. It's completely different. They're going to be rejected. They're going to try things and it's not going to work. They're going to be attacked. There's going to be a lot of things that are going to happen. And in order for them to succeed, it's going to be almost like a survival thing. They're going to have, well, for them, definitely was survival. They had to succeed or they were going to die. As a writer, what are you exploring? You are exploring your own potential. You're discovering what you're capable of creating. You're discovering things about yourself with your writing, what's important to you, and what you need to say. And this is exciting and it's also frightening because we don't know what we're going to discover. What if we discover that we really do not have the talent to do this? I'm sure that is definitely a common fear, right? What if I discover I'm not really good at this? What if I discover that the stories that I'm interested in telling, other people are not interested in reading? What if I discover that, yes, I do have potential for this, but it's going to be so much work and I don't know that I want to put in that much work? What if I discover that I don't have the drive to do this? What if I discover all kinds of things about myself? What if I discover that I do have talent, but that I am afraid of the success that I am going to get or that I am getting? So there's a lot of things that you discover about yourself as a writer and yourself as a person when you are writing. So in order to succeed though, in order to say, no, I'm going to keep moving and I'm going to write this book and I'm going to try to sell it and I'm going to do all these things that are scary and I'm going to face these fears that I have. In order to do that, we do have to do that burning of the ships. We have to tell ourselves that from this day forward, we are no longer ever going to be, there's never going to be a time when we're not writing. There's never going to be a time where I can return to this sort of innocent life of not being a writer, not creating stories, not dreaming up characters. It's just part of who I am, and I'm always going to do that. You can't ever really deny that you're a writer again after a certain point, right? So what do the burning of the ships look like? Well, for me, it was that I told myself after a certain amount of time, I had already wasted so much time. I had already told so many people that I was going to write. I'd already skipped out on a lot of family events and family weekends or whatever because I wanted to stay home and write. And so I didn't want to let people down. So if I couldn't go back and say, well, no, I changed my mind, I'm not going to do this after all. It's just too hard, right? No, I wanted there to be something. I wanted there to be a reward for me and for them saying, hey, look, I did do this. I was gone for many hours. There was a lot of times we didn't get to do things, but I did actually achieve this goal that I set for myself. So maybe it's not wanting to let people down. Maybe it's not wanting to appear foolish. Maybe it's not wanting to have wasted all this time and money, because it costs money. If you've gone to workshops, if you've bought books on writing, if you've gone to conferences, if you've done many things, you've invested a lot of money into this career of yours, right? So you don't want to have wasted all that money, appear foolish, let people down. So those are the burning of the ships, right? I'm just going to make sure that I do this because I don't want to fail at this point. I want to show that this was all worth it, that I did it for a reason. So what you want to do then is not leave yourself any options. There are no options other than to continue to write and to be successful as a writer. And that doesn't mean, or I'm not saying, hey, quit your job and then, put your whole life at risk here. I'm not saying that. Most of us don't do that. Most of us will have our full-time job, plus we'll write on the side, right? We have our family and we write as well. Usually what we sacrifice is our sleep or things like that, right? Our weekends, things like that. But we don't really burn. I mean, we could, right? We could burn the ships. We could just say, I'm quitting everything and I'm going to be successful. But most of us don't really want to do that. We don't really want to risk everything because we don't have to. If we had to, if this was the only option, right, to sell a book and make money from your book, you could probably do it. If someone said you have to do this, otherwise, you're losing everything. You're losing all your family. You're losing if you don't do it. Then you're going to do it. You're going to figure out how to do that. But most of us don't want to be put in that position, and we don't have to be put in that position. So, but there are other ways to create that stress in a way. It could be just telling friends and family that this is what you're doing and you don't want to let them down. It could be joining a critique group where people keep each other accountable and you start to feel like, like you're not really doing your part if you show up to your critique group and you never have anything written for them to look at and to read and to critique. So that could be part of it too. That's pushing you to move forward. I had a friend who wanted to lose weight really, really badly. So she found this group online that you had to bet, like you had to invest money and say that you were going to lose a certain amount of weight by a certain amount of time. And if you didn't, then you would lose your money. So it was an incentive. It was this, I don't want to lose this, so I'm going to do it. And now she actually did not reach her goal, but she had lost a lot of weight. So she was not disappointed that she didn't get her money back. It was almost like, paying for weight loss. But, we can do things like that too. Where we're paying money and saying we're investing this much that we're going to have this much done. You can do it with a small group if you want. And if I don't lose this much, if I don't write this many pages or finish my book by a certain amount of time, I lose my money. It goes to maybe something good, some charity or something, or it goes to the people who actually did achieve their goals. So you can do things like that. But what you want to do is create a situation where you're unable to retreat and that you are committed to your goal. You have a higher chance of success if you commit yourself and you leave yourself really no other option. With Cortez, those men had no other option but to succeed. And so you want to create a situation like that where you have no other option but to get your books written and to write. And honestly, you really don't have an option because, like I said, you're never ever going to go back to a time when you weren't a writer. Cortez's men had to forget that they had another life somewhere else. And you will have to forget that there was ever a time when you weren't a writer. So that fantasy world that you could have had a different destiny is really just that. It's really not true. This was your destiny to become a writer, to write your books, to tell your stories, and to create your own brand of success by writing the stories that only you can write. So burn those ships and write your stories. And as always, I ask you to like my videos so that I can continue to do well on YouTube and continue to make videos for you. Also share them with friends, other writers, and subscribe to the channel. I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.